you, Erin. It is my pleasure to be here today with all of these amazing human beings from all over the place. So thank you for the opportunity. I think back to when I sort of formed a relationship with my first mentor, and her name was Dr. Kathy Bryce. And I met her about 30 years ago. And I didn't have the language of what a mentor was at that time. I just knew that she was rooting for me. I knew that she saw something in me and she was willing to pour her wisdom and experiences into me personally and professionally. And that has turned into a very long-standing friendship. She's about 15 years older than I am, and so now we're much closer in age now than we were when we first met, and it has just been such a gift along my journey. And so, if I can help frame that for folks through this network, I will just it'll be so gratifying because I've seen the magic of it in my own professional life. So, if we could go to the next slide. I think the language of mentoring, the more I've learned about it in kind of a formal way, the language of mentoring is important to consider. I think any relationship that you have with a person who's supporting your growth can be referred to simply as a mentoring relationship. I do think, though, that there are nuances in types of supportive relationships that are important to think through, and that the language we use is important to clarify. So on this chart, you can see what a mentor is, and that is someone who provides guidance, advice, and support based on their experiences. They're pouring into the mentee, not necessarily doing all the talking by any means, but really that role is one where there is a person who has experience and a person who has less experience, and they are supporting each other so that the person with less experience has a ladder, if you will, up into types of knowing and learning that they wouldn't have had before. A coach, which is a really distinct, I mean, if you have any experience in professional coaching, and there are certifications around types of coach work that people do, it can be a form of mentorship as well. But I think one of the most important distinctions about coaching is that in a coaching relationship, the coach poses questions, really strategically worded, strategically chosen questions to help the coachee, person on the other side of the table, to help that person really come to their own conclusions about the right next step, really digging into the mine, if you will, of what is inside the coachee so that they chart their own path and have a great sense of entitlement because they have been empowered to consider and strategize in their own head about the right next step. Certainly, a coach can plant some seeds about potential solutions in a way that's more traditional to a mentor, but really the primary objective of a person in a coaching relationship is for the coachee to independently chart that path. And then this next one, I'll refer to as a sponsor. And this was a new one for me that I learned the language of pretty recently through the organization that I'm a part of. And that is somebody that is actively advocating for your career advancement within your organization. And for me, the most on point way to describe a sponsor is that it's the person who speaks highly of you when you're not in the room, right? So somebody in your organization who's like, hey, I've worked with Erin before, and she would be perfect for this task because I have seen her do X, Y, and Z in this other setting, right? It's kind of like, so you're basically providing sponsorship in elevating a person for responsibility, et cetera. And as I was thinking about it and really talking about this with one of my mentors, we talked about the unique importance of each of these roles in anyone's career trajectory. And frankly, the sponsorship piece of it I didn't really fully understand the importance of until I watched a video, and I can share the video link in the chat with you later. But it's essentially the video of this woman who reached a level in her career, very high level. She was finally like in the room where it happened. And it was a backdoor room talking about promotions and bonus structures for people in a corporation. And all of a sudden, she realized that the people who were being spoken about highly in this room, whether they had the greatest qualifications or not, the people who had sponsors, who were advocating for their advancement or for their benefit without them being present, those are the people who reached higher levels of status within the organization. So that was something that was not really in my equation. And maybe it's because, I've, for most of my career, not worked in a competitive environment per se. I've been more around the human relations and educational side of things. But I want to make sure we don't lose that, because I think that's important. And I think I saw in the chat come through that a sponsor could advocate for you outside as well. And I think that's absolutely true. I think in this definition that we have on the screen, it's within your organization. But I think just as easily, somebody could position you for a role or for recognition outside of your organization as well. So if we could go to the next slide. There's a lot of text on this slide, and it is not translated into Spanish because I borrowed it. But I wanted to go ahead and include it here, and we'll make sure that we try to make it as accessible as possible. But I'll speak to each of the 6 types of mentorship that are identified on this mentor wheel. And in any given mentor experience or exchange that you have, you're probably not going to touch on all 6 of these types of mentoring. But for me and for several others, it's been really helpful to think through the kinds of mentoring perspective that a person could get out of a mentoring relationship. So the first type is the motivators, and that's like your energizer. It's connecting with those who spur you into action and challenge you to do more than you thought possible. And with each of these types of mentors, there's also a question. And so for instance, this one is, who inspires me to exceed my limits? Who energizes my ambitions? And so as you're thinking about potential mentors that you seek out, and I'm listed as a mentor, but I also am a mentee in multiple situations in my life. So I think the flex is that we are both most of the time. But seeking out friendships or relationships or mentorships where you know that if I sit around this person, I'm going to be inspired to be better because that's just the energy they bring. And so that's one type. Another type is a connector. And that is seeking out those who bridge gaps and introduce you to new opportunities. I have one friend in a former school district where I worked, and I cannot have a single conversation with her where she doesn't say, hey, you're working on this project. You need to touch base with this person over here because I think you two could get into some really good trouble together, right? And so thinking through either your perspective as a mentor, how can you potentially connect your mentee to maybe an organization or another thought leader in that space, but also knowing where you might benefit from some of those connections as a mentee. Another one around the wheel, the third one down to the right, is the cheerleaders. And that is surrounding yourself with advocates who believe in you and who celebrate your success. By golly, we all need those. I can't tell you how appreciative I am that mentor that I met so many years ago. Sometimes when we catch up for lunch about once every three months or so now. And I don't know if she's doing it purposely or not, but I know that one of the things I always take from that is that I know she's my cheerleader. She'll say, Suzanne, you know you're doing the hard work right now. You know that you're making a difference. And it seems a little trite, but by golly, I just said by golly, that's silly. But I leave those lunches and my bucket is just full because someone has intentionally noticed what it is that I'm doing. I'm going to go across the wheel and I'm going to skip the role model and I'm going to go over to the straight shooters because I think it's an important balance to the cheerleaders, right? I want to be around Kathy because I know she's going to tell me that I did a great job. I also would probably be in hot water if I didn't have somebody in my circle who was a straight shooter, like the devil's advocate, the people who will provide honest, direct feedback for my growth. I have a friend like this as well, happens to be a male, and he does not have a hard time um, calling me out on something that he thinks I need to be able to articulate more clearly, right? Or he will poke a devil's advocate question into my happy bubble every time. And on the one hand, I have to be careful how much exposure I have to that straight shooter, because I don't want it to decrease my energy. And at the same time, having that voice in my wheel, in my circle of friends and my network is really important because it helps me to see what might not have been obvious to me when I was looking at something through my rose-colored glasses, so to speak, right? I'm going to go back down to the role model form of a mentor, and that is seeking mentors who exemplify success and learning from their experiences. A book that I just recently read by Alison Frigall is called Likeable Badass. And I hope it's okay to say that word on this call. But she talks so much about mentoring women, and she talks about how important it is to find a role model, somebody who's in your field or who you admire from afar, who really is doing what you aspire to be doing, and can be a role model for you, and to ask them for mentorship, even if it's just occasionally or even once. That perspective is super important to help you grow. And then the final mentor type on the wheel is the brainstormer, and that is your creative side. Erin, I consider you to be a mentor to me as well. And one of the things that I remember so fondly about our time together is going into rooms at the office where there was a wall of whiteboards, and we just whiteboarded away. We didn't know where we were going to land, but we knew that our creative side, or kind of that brainstorming, all ideas are safe, person that we were for each other was always going to end up better at the end of those sessions than we started. And so whether you have a whiteboard in your room where you're meeting with this person or not, it's the person where you can share your craziest ideas, and they will be a thought partner that helps to make those ideas grow. So that was a lot. Like I said at the beginning, I don't think anybody needs necessarily 6 separate mentors at 6 different times. That's a lot to keep up with. And these personas, though, they really do overlap a lot. And I think it is important when you're in a mentor-mentee relationship to sort of keep in mind all of the different types of support that you're providing for each other.